So next we have the presentation and update of King County Metro H-Line. And we have Chris Arkills of King County.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Chris Arkills and I work in government relations for King County Metro. Oh no? Is it working now?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. My name is Chris Arkills. I work in government relations for King County Metro, and I'm glad to be back at Burien City Council tonight. I've been joined by Major Todd Morrell of the Metro Transit Police. I'm here to give an update on how things are going with the H-Line and to answer any questions you might have. I'll have a few minutes of opening remarks followed by the Major, and who will talk about safety and security at the Burien Transit Center and on our system. Then we'll open the floor to your questions. First, I thought I would start with ridership on the H-Line. From summer 22 to summer 23, Metro ridership in general increased by 15% coming out of the pandemic. We've definitely noticed some clear patterns. Places that have more working class people, more service class people tend to come back to transit much faster than affluent commuters. So that has driven Metro to double down on our equity initiative. However, the H-Line saw a 31% increase during that same time, from 5,540 people a day to 7,230 people a day. And I had our team pull the numbers on just the Burien stops alone, because I knew that's where your interest would be. And they show an impressive, similar impressive increase. H-Line stops in Burien have increased from 1,630 to 2,080, which is a 28% increase. So Burien residents are using the H-Line, and they showed that the ridership is growing, and prior to the pandemic, the Route 120 carried 10,000 people a day, and was one of the 10 busiest routes in the metro system. It still is as the H-Line, and we believe that it's going to continue to rebound to that ridership that it enjoyed prior to the pandemic. Many of you probably have questions about whether the bus lane priority is really needed. The stops were removed and the bus line priority was put in to save an average of 8 to 9 minutes from the Burien Transit Center to downtown. That's a 21% improvement in travel time for riders from Burien. Buses are also much more likely to keep their schedules and avoid bunching up so that you get 3 in a row and then none for 20 minutes. And I will note that those speed and reliability importance are more important to people who live in Burien than they are to people who live in the north part of Delridge, because they're almost downtown by that point. So the speed and reliability is really critical to this the line. The design of the RapidRide H-Line is to facilitate quick and easy boarding. Inline boarding allows buses to pull up to a curb level with the doors level with the doors to reduce the need for lifts for those with mobility challenges. It also dramatically reduces the time for buses to start moving again, because car drivers, despite it being the law, do not yield to buses and let buses back into traffic. I also wanted to address some questions I've received from Burien staff that have come from council members and others. Many of you have asked about blocking left turns in that stretch of AMBOM where the yellow markers exist in the median. The reason for those is to stop drivers from making left turns in that stretch that is where there's only one general travel lane, and slowing down both general traffic and avoiding bus lane conflicts. The Burien City Council was fully briefed on this design in 2018. Many of you were not on the council yet, so you may have not been familiar with that safety treatment. Several of you have also asked when the project will be fully complete, including some final channelization improvements between 146th and 150th on AMBOM. And we expect to sign off on final completion to all improvements by Q1 of 2024. Also wanted to touch on a few of the safety improvements that were incorporated into the design of the H-Line. All stops were designed with CPTED principles. CPTED is crime prevention through environmental design. If you notice, the shelters are much more open. Both as you as a person walking up to the shelter have a clear visual line of who's in the shelter, what's happening in the shelter. And when you're in the shelter, you have a clear visual line of the neighborhood. That's good CPTED design. And people, we've also really focused on improving lighting in those shelters. And the real-time information gives riders more comfort as to that a bus is coming. All those things make people more likely to ride the bus. And then I wanted to touch on two more brief items before turning the microphone over to Major Morrell. First, we've been asked about when the first direct commuter buses, the 121, 122, and 123 might return to service in Burien. Ridership on commuter buses was hit hardest during the COVID epidemic because most professionals were able to stay home and work at home. So we focused on working class people and the places where the most ridership was. And so, and then this last fall, we had to also reduce some service throughout the system because we were missing too many trips. We did not have enough drivers to deliver all the service we were delivering. And so, we reduced a few more of those commuter trips. I believe in Burien, we reduced the 121, which was still traveling at that before then. But in 2024, Metro will be kicking off the South Link restructure associated with the extension of light rail to Federal Way and Highline College. And at this time, we'll be taking a fresh look with public input and meetings throughout South King County, including in Burien. And we'll look at how to restructure service, and those commuter routes will be part of that process that we're talking about. And finally, many of you may have seen the article in last Friday's Seattle Times or observed crews of people assisting people at the transit center. Those are our behavioral health workers who were funded in last year's King County budget. Really is a remarkable program. The article was in last Friday's Seattle Times by Mike Lindboom. Burien's one of 4 locations. There's a non-transit team in Pioneer Square, one at Aurora Village, and a sound transit team that works in the downtown transit tunnel stations. They've had 4,500 contacts since April. They've handed out over 1,900 winter supply kits and hygiene kits and other kits to people. They help connect people with services, help connect them to shelter, hygiene centers, and they're staffed 7 days a week, morning and night. Burien is the place where the program has been most successful. We recently added an entire second crew so we could have people there all day. We found out that just having people there overnight meant you were trying to refer people to services when all those services were closed. So by intercepting a lot of the daytime population, we've been able to do this. And finally, anecdotally, we believe that we've been able to diffuse a lot of situations on buses and in the transit center, and that reduces the need to call the transit police, for things that can be easily resolved. So we feel like it's a very successful program and part of the overall safety and operation of the Burien Transit Center. So with that, I will turn it over to Major Morrell, and our intention was to give you most of the time just to ask questions. So thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the council. My name is Todd Morrell, and I'm the chief of the Metro Transit Police. Prior to my appointment as chief, as most of you know, I was fortunate to serve as your operations captain for the city of Burien. It's good to be back amongst my friends, my colleagues in the city of Burien. I'm here to speak tonight about the efforts of the Metro Transit Police within the city of Burien, and specifically as they relate to the H line. In 2023, the Metro Transit Police have responded to 1,389 separate transit incidents in the city limits of Burien. 1,030 of those have a direct nexus to the Burien Transit Center. Not all of our responses are in direct response to criminal activity per se, as many of these responses involve routine area checks, operator contacts, and general presence within our transit system. But it is reasonable to ascertain that a portion of those responses were related to a series of offenses codified under RCW 991-025, commonly known as unlawful transit conduct. It's important to note that our responses are often in concert or within support of the on-site security measures employed by Metro Transit at the Burien Transit Center. The city of Burien, specifically the Burien Transit Center, currently and historically, I'm sorry, I just went way down the line here. Technology. The city of Burien, specifically the Burien Transit Center, currently and historically have received the majority of our available resources and services within the scope of our capabilities. For reference, the Metro Transit Police have responded to the Aurora Transit Center 565 times in 2023, roughly half, and the Tukwila International Boulevard Station 426 times, roughly 40%. In response to the recent tragedy on the H-Line, the Metro Transit Police immediately focused directed patrols, emphasis boardings, and our bicycle teams along the H-Line with particular emphasis in the city of Burien and White Center to the north. The Metro Transit Police committed 1,126 hours of overtime to that effort. Additionally, the Metro Transit Police committed investigative resources to that investigation, which ultimately led to the identification and arrest of the subject alleged to be responsible. The Metro Transit Police are aware of the issues affecting our cities as they relate to transit and are taking proactive efforts to increase our effectiveness and responsiveness to those needs. We stand on the precipice of reinstating our suspension program, which was paused in 2020. The reinstatement of the suspension program will afford my deputies the legal standing to enforce the law when all other options have been exhausted. The Metro Transit Police will always strive to connect our most vulnerable citizens with community-based services through voluntary compliance, but before employing traditional criminal justice metrics. I currently serve as the liaison for the King County Sheriff's Office and our partnerships with community-based providers. I have a long history both with transit and the city of Burien, working with providers who are committed to providing alternatives to traditional criminal justice metrics. That commitment holds true today as I am actively involved in the selection process for our next partner that will be focused on providing resources for our most marginalized citizens who utilize our transit system. Additionally, the Metro Transit Police are working with local municipalities to establish partnerships in an effort to tailor our responses to specific community needs. By working with local municipalities and their courts, local governments will have a more active voice in how violations of transit conduct are addressed within their specific cities. Burien holds a special place in my heart. And as the chief of the Metro Transit Police, I'm committed to working with you to find tenable solutions to issues occurring on and near transit properties and our vehicles. I thank you for your time and for allowing me to speak to you about the Metro Transit Police.
We have some questions here, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you both for being here tonight. It's nice to meet you, Chris. Thanks for being here. Nice to meet you. I have 3 questions. I'll ask one at a time because council members go after each other, but okay, just so that you're aware, I'm going to ask you a question about the travel time and the bus lane and the possibility of moving toward a design that's similar to Interbay, where there's commuter times and then the non-commuter times for bus lanes. So I'm going to ask a question about that and kind of why that's happening in Interbay and why it wouldn't happen here. And I'm going to ask you a question about bathroom potential and who has money to help construct a bathroom at the public transit center, and then the county property and the request to have proposals for building housing at the county transit property here. So, but my first question's on the commuter time and the lane usage in Interbay, where they have certain times that are commuter times where it's only buses, where no one else can ride in that lane. But then outside of those commuter times, they allow for mixed bus car driving, kind of in the middle of the day. So
I am not a transit engineer, but I can tell you there's a couple different things in Interbay. One, that is a multi-lane street with far more lanes than Ambon, and so the transit priority is needed in the mornings because there's also a lot more freight traffic on that corridor. It has a lot of different characteristics than this corridor. But we actually are in talks with the city about having those curb lanes be transit all the time.
In the city of Seattle?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay.
In interpay. And that is generally our goal. The other thing is, I will say that more and more people are not working the typical 8 to 5 schedule. And one of the things coming out of the pandemic is maybe less people work 5 days a week, more people work flex schedules, people who certainly work at Target or, you know, Les Schwab or any place like that might go to work at 3 in the afternoon. So what we're trying to do is build a frequent all-day network that people can use all day, not just professionals traveling during the peaks.
I guess my one question to that then is, do you have data that shows that that is the case? Like, do you have data that shows that the H line through Burien is being ridden at all times at similar levels, or is it commuter?
As a longtime rider of the 120 and the H line I will say that it is one of the most consistent routes in the county. It has people. It picks up riders consistently at stops throughout the corridor. It picks them up generally at all times of the day. It doesn't have as big of a peak in the morning and afternoon as some routes. It's a consistent route. You know, I've stood on the Route 120 at 11 o'clock at night.
Right, but do you have data? Because you were telling us that there was data for Burien.
I don't know that we have fresh data, but it usually takes about 6 months after things are implemented for us to start getting transit data. But we're having to come back and talk about or answer your detailed question.
All right,
more. So
cool.
Second question was.
Well, I'll let someone else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions? Councilmember Sarah.
Well, first of all, thank you for presenting and talking to us about all the different issues going on with transit that impact Burien. I am kind of tunnel vision on the 121, 122, and 123, and just wanted to say thank you for bringing back conversation about them. I think there are a lot of the feedback I've gotten from people is that they're, as you said, maybe weren't doing hours downtown, and those have been reinstated, and they either are driving now, which is kind of the opposite of what we would hope for, or they're using a much longer and more circuitous path.
Yeah, part of it is given our workforce challenges and supply chain challenges. It's been a challenge for transit agencies and all kinds of governments all over the world to hire enough people to do essential public services. And Metro is not immune to that. So we've had to make some tough decisions on prioritizing things. We know that there are a lot of people who love those commuter routes from Burien, but we also know that it's probably more important to dedicate those investments into the H line and into all day services. All those commuter routes that we discontinued, we made sure there was another option, even if it wasn't quite as fast, within 6 blocks throughout the county.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Councilmember Garcia. Did you have one?
Okay. Chris, good to see you again. Thank you for your time and presentation. Same to you, Captain. We miss you. You did an amazing job here as part of the team here. But lucky that I guess we're sharing you now with the rest of the county. Thank you for the work you guys do. Not so much questions, more comments. Would love to see additional investments into the lighting, and really love the designs that you guys did to all the stops to making sure that it's clear, there's views, sight lines. I think that's very critical as we look at public safety and look at ways to improve that. So thank you for that. I grew up taking the bus downtown to work at a restaurant. My dad still takes that 120 line. I personally don't like the H line. It slows down my personal use of that route. Driving on Ambom, it's a pain more. It sucks, man. I hate it personally, but I know that it's better for the whole of Burien. In fact, my dad, who's 76, and I don't think he's gonna be driving that much more. He now, all the time, he's like, the one good thing you've done, even though I really didn't do anything, is that H line, because it makes it a lot safer for me to feel safe driving, because everything's slowed down a lot more. And he uses that all the time to go visit a relative. So just want to speak as to, I know that it is a very complex investment into our city to provide services that are needed. But as someone who grew up in that lower income household that needed and depended on that bus to take us to work at those restaurants, to clean those houses, to do those things, I understand that it's important to invest there. And hopefully future solutions will come about because we do miss the commuter services. I'm sure everybody in the county does. And hopefully we can do this type of investment into the Boulevard Park neighborhood as well somehow, because that neighborhood has not been invested in and is limited to that bus. So just comments for now.
Thank you.
Councilman.
So I'm glad to see, Captain, that we have presence of officers at these bus stops. To me, that's probably the most concerning is the behavior that are at these bus stops and more at the transit station. So I think that that's extremely important. I guess my question would be on recruiting officers to make sure that they're at these stops. I've seen the progress, and more than anything, I think it may be the perception, right? People feel safe when they see law enforcement there. And, you know, just recently there's been, you know, obviously you talked about the death, and then the other individual, which was another transportation that was hit in the head with a hammer, which I've known her for many years. And so those are concerning. You know, my daughter goes to UW, and, you know, she used to take the transit to Burien, but it was scary. You know, the behavior was scary. And so just want to hear a little bit more about, you know, officers. What does that look like? What hours do they work? And then is there a challenge with recruiting more officers for the transit stations?
Thank you for bringing that up, council member. You speak to my heart. I will not waste the council's time to bemoan our staffing issues, which are very real, but they're not unique to Metro. My colleague Chief Bo struggles with the same things. Currently, right now, we're running at about a 26% vacancy rate. As it relates to your question about recruiting into transit, I do not have that problem. I have a line of willing suitors that want to come in, but I'm also competing with the larger sheriff's office on what share of those resources I get. As an aside, Chief Bo is probably trespassing me from Burien because I come from here and you have great officers, and I try to move them away and bring them down to Metro. So the recruiting problems are real, not as they relate to Metro, but as far as available resources. The pile of candidates is slim, and that's not unique to the Metro Transit Police. As far as recruiting or increasing our presence along the system, I will share with you that Metro is very benevolent in their funding of overtime and emphasis efforts. And absent any developing issue, whether it be up in Shoreline or somewhere else, when things are normal, business is normal, those emphasis efforts are always down here in the South End, specifically Burien and TIB. So when I have extra resources on overtime monies and I have an appetite within my contract for them to work it, our efforts are always concentrated down here.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
So I'll combine these two because I think it speaks to a question about just the redevelopment of the site in general, or the use of the site in general, because there's a lot of empty space. Right. Metro owns it. And so I'm wondering if there's if Metro has plans for or is going to put in an agency request funding from the county council for a bathroom to create a public bathroom at the Burien Transit Center. And then the second to that, the question around the parking lot owned by Metro and the request for proposals on what to do with it and redevelop it and put housing there. I'm just curious where you are in that process and when that process plans to be finalized.
Sure, I'll take those separately. The council did pass a proviso having a trial period of public bathrooms at Burien and the Aurora Village Transit Center. In the coming months, they will be discussing with the city of Burien a ADA porta potty at Burien Transit Center, see how it can be maintained, see where it can be located, and So that is something we're aware of. I'll say in general, government and Metro's not immune, have not figured out the bathroom problem in the United States. I just got back from 3 weeks in Mexico. I can go anywhere and it says baños 5 pesos, you know. But in America, you've got to be rich enough to go into a Starbucks, you know, to use a bathroom half the time. And it is a public health problem. And I think we are going to have to deal with it in the future. I'm not a policymaker, so I can't say that. But, you know, I'm a firm believer in public bathroom facilities. As to the TOD property, we just concluded or just wrapping up a series of meetings with a community task force staffed by several Burien residents and Burien staff, and also had an open house, and really hope to build something exciting for the community. We heard a lot of things about ground floor use. We heard a lot of things about the mix of affordable to workforce housing, so that will probably be going out for an RFP for that property sometime in the middle of 2024, and expect it to be a very public process. We know it's a super important corner for the city.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you both for coming in your presentation.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.